to Geilo in the summer. Here they're refurbishing a house. This is the house where my mother was born. This used to be her farm, or my mother's family farm. This is the barn that my grandfather built, and this red house here to the right is the holiday home of my family. It's owned by my brother now, but there's a typical thing for the Norwegian to have a holiday home up in the mountains or by the sea, or maybe both. More than 60% of the population of Norway have access to a cabin in the family and up in the mountain or by the sea. So it's very typical for the Norwegians during their holiday to spend it in their holiday home up in the mountains. 80% of the Norwegians spend the majority of their holiday in Norway. So we are very fond of the nature. The population of Norway is only 5.5 million, which means 18 people per square kilometer, while the average for all of Europe is 75 people per square kilometer. So Norway, fairly large country for the population of only 5.5 million. We have plenty of space. If you look at the map, Norway looks like a guitar. You know, the northern part of Norway being the neck of the guitar, and now we are in the southern part right in the middle. And to drive from the southern tip of Norway, from Lindesnes or Kristiansand, to North Cape, the most northern tip of Europe and also Norway, takes 3 days to drive. That's the length. And then if you turn Norway upside down, the northern tip of Norway will reach south of Italy. So you could say that the length of Norway is the length of main Europe. So it's long and narrow. And the road we are driving on now is the main road between Oslo and Bergen. Oslo being the capital of Norway with about 750,000, and Bergen is the next largest city but only 300,000 people, so much smaller than Oslo. And if you take the area around Oslo with a 3-hour drive, it covers 3 million people. So the majority of the population of Norway live Oslo and the area around Oslo, while the rest, 2.5 million, is spread all over the country. And being the main road between Oslo and Bergen, it takes summertime between 7 and 8 hours to drive from Oslo to Bergen. While winter time you have to consider a few extra hours because of the winter conditions. It's a bit more difficult to drive, especially over the mountain in the winter time. Sometimes the road is closed because the amount of snow. Up on Hardangerfjord, which we will be up on in about 20 minutes, we'll be on top of Hardangerfjord. The average amount of snow in the winter time is 4 to 6 meters of snow. And down here in Geilo it's between 3 and 4 meters of snow in average. And snow can come as early as September, quite normal in October, but it can come in the end of September. So it snows in October, November, December, January, February, March and April. So 7 months of snowing. So you could say we have 8 months of snow, and then we have 4 months of summer, and then the growing period, you know, when it grows in the grass, it's about 3 months only. So it's a short summer compared to the winter. So I usually say in Norway we have 6 to 8 months of winter, all depending where you are in the country, but that's quite up here, 6 to 8 months of winter. Geilo is situated around 800 meters above sea level. Now we're climbing upwards up to about soon 900 meters above sea level, and the highest point we are driving over Hardangerfjord is 1,250 meters, 1,250. So we are in the top end of Hallingdal, which is the name of the valley that goes all the way up to Geilo, and then we leave the valley now climbing up towards the Hardangerfjord mountain plateau. The Hardangerfjord mountain plateau is 8,300 square kilometers in size, and about 40% of the mountain plateau is national park that opened in 1981. and it's the largest national park in Norway. And being a national park means you don't develop that area whatsoever. You don't build any roads, any houses, anything. You just keep nature just like it is forever. We have about 25 national parks around Norway, and we have another one to the right side of the bus up by Hardangerfjord. They call the Hardangerfjord National Park, was opened a few years ago. We're getting close to Ustaose, a small community with a population of only 20 and more than 1,000 holiday homes and cabins in the area, owned by people from the Oslo area and the Bergen area, both areas. But you see these cabins coming up here to the left are all holiday homes. There are close to 800,000 holiday homes all over Norway, and the average use is actually only 21 days of the year, so it's a lot of money tied up in something you don't use that often. Of course, some people are using their cabin much more and some people less, but the average use of these cabins are about 3 weeks of the year. And the average value of these cabins are between 250 and 300,000 euro or dollars, it's about the same. And but of course you find much more expensive cabins and a lot cheaper. You know, you can find it for less than 50,000 euro. Might not have electricity or running water, but it's still a very cozy place to stay up in the mountain. So all depending how much money you want to spend is what I can say about the value of these holiday homes. Even some holiday homes are in a better quality than the house people are living in all year round. So that says a bit, you know. But all these you see here to the right and also over to the left are all holiday homes. And owned by people that don't live here all year round. They're only living here, staying here for the holidays. So at Christmas time, at winter holidays, and at Easter holiday, and during the summer weeks in July, 2nd, 3rd, 4th week of July, then there is between 30 and 40,000 people living in this area with a population of 4,800 all year round. So tourism is very important to this area. So we're driving into Ustaose, the community with only 20 people living all year round. If you look over to the right, you'll see Hardangerfjord, a large mountain ridge that goes all the way from Finse to Geilo, a 35-kilometer long mountain ridge. The highest point on the mountain is 1,933 meters, 1933, which is actually the highest mountain in the southern part of the country, while the higher mountains are a bit further north from here, but this one is basically the last mountain before you go further south in Norway. So standing on top of Hardangerfjord on a day like this, when it's so clear, you can see most of the southern part of Norway from the mountain top. And as you see, there's still snow on the top of that mountain. There's also a little bit of snow staying all over the summer before the snow arrives again in month of September, October. So Hardangerfjord up to the right, and now we are in the Ustaose. They have a grocery store and a petrol station, that's about it. And as you see, there are more than 1,000 holiday homes in this area. Used to have a hotel, this used to be a hotel to the right, but now it's transferred into holiday apartments. So we are now situated about 1,000 meters above sea level. You still see the trees. The tree line in Hardangerfjord is 1,050 meters. So there are no trees above 1,050 meters. And the reason for that is the summer is too short for the trees to be able to grow. You know, they might start growing period, but within 3 months, it's snow, 3-4 months, it's snow in the area. So the trees do not really have time to grow on Hardangerfjord. As you can see, parts of Hardangerfjord over to the left there. Now you see there are no trees up in the heights there, but it's quite flat. The mountain plateau is quite flat. There are no peak mountains, which means that Hardangerfjord is an excellent place to go hiking. You know, it's really easy for most people. If you are normally fit, you can go walking in these mountains because there is no climbing and there are nice paths to follow. And also in Hardangerfjord, there are about 40 to 50 cabins, and some of them are lodges, like hotels in the mountain. So you can plan your trip accordingly. You can go to a lodge where you have booked a bed for the night, have a nice solid dinner, good dinner, go to bed, sleep in a good bed, have a solid breakfast in the morning, and then you can continue your journey to the next lodge a few hours away, 4, 5, 6 hours away, all depending on which route you are taking. So it's quite convenient to walk these mountains. Of course, you have to be prepared of walking the mountains. You need to bring a sleeping bag in case you get into bad weather and don't make it for the lodge in time. And then you need a little bit of emergency food, of course, in your backpack. And you need to be a little bit used of the nature and the mountains. You should not go in these mountains without any experience, because you'd be surprised how quick the weather might change. So even though it's easy, it's very important that you are a little prepared and used to do hiking in the nature. So we will arrive at the waterfall of Hardangerfjord in about 1 hour from now, exactly 1 hour from now, about 20-25 minutes past 11. Well, I can tell you this, that I've done this trip about 200 times now, last summer and this summer. And I have to say, we have the top 10 day today. You know, with the clearance, the blue sky, no wind, nice temperature, and you can see very far. It doesn't happen that often over here. It's very often cloudy and foggy and so on. But today is a brilliant day. This is really unique. So you've been very smart. You picked a good day of going over the mountain. You see behind us here now, you see Hardangerfjord quite beautifully. Normally you have clouds kind of covering it a bit, and then you have a little bit of fog, because if you had a little bit of rain and then heat afterwards, then you get fog. So then the outlook of the nature is not as clear as it is today. So now there's hardly any clouds, very clear, and you can see very, very, very far, which makes everything much more beautiful. Feil farge på den bilen foran der.
Ja, det er da. Så er han svensk.
kjørt filmen på TV-en her når det er dårlige dager.
Ja, faktisk. Og det enkelte turer var helt fantastisk. Det skulle vært filmet. Det er jo så klart det er fint. Vi får håpe de får det til neste år.
Ja.
Let's get a cabin then.
How much a cabin?
Is it between cheap ones go for 50,000?
How much you're renting?
Right, good price. You're in Norway. Around 250,000. Not bad.
So we're closing up to Hardangerfjord, also a very small community in this area with a population of only 9. It's the Koot family. I know them all. And I better not forget one. So it's 9 people. They own the hotel, which you see down to the left. And they're quite busy both winter and summertime. Around the corner here, if you look up to the right, you see a red cabin, a bit larger than everyone else. That's owned by Princess Astrid. Princess Astrid is the sister of King Harald of Norway. So we call this the royal cabin of Hardangerfjord, this red one right in front of us here up to the right. And actually our previous king, King Olav, he was very fond of skiing. So he came skiing here in the 60s and the 70s at Easter time and stayed in this red cabin up to the right. And of course King Olav was a very popular man, a very popular king all over Norway. But the people in Hardangerfjord was quite proud that he came here every winter.
Spain.
Yes. That day we went on the bus. Yeah. I was
No, we
thinking that.
drove.
No. Oh, when we drove Sevilla?
No, yeah.
Yeah, but also we went to the
Helgastone.
north. Do you remember?
Helgastone.
Mm-hmm.
Close.
It's like the twist and yeah, the twist here. This is beautiful. What a beautiful day.
Just 11,700 years ago was the last ice age. And then it started melting and moving towards the ocean. And then of course all these rocks you see here moved under the ice while it was moving and melting over 1,700 years. They say the last ice age was over 10,000 years ago. You know, a few years ago. But all these rocks you see here has been moved and stopped moving then 10,000 years ago, and it's been situated just like this for more than 10,000 years. And the amount of ice on top of Hardangerfjord, it was 1,500 meters of ice, 1.5 kilometers, almost a mile of ice on top of this landscape. Of course, that was heavy weight. And of course, when that started moving over 1,700, this didn't go on for 10, 15 years. 1,700 years, slow movement all the time, shaping this landscape. So the ice age shaped this landscape more than 10,000 years ago. But there are still leftovers from the ice age. We have a glacier we will see over to the right in a few minutes. We'll see Hardangerfjord, which is a glacier, the 6th largest glacier in Norway, 75 square kilometers in size. Still melting a little bit every year, you know, but not dramatically. But it is melting and filling up the water reservoir over in Eidfjord. I'll show that to you a bit later. Filling it with water, which we use for hydroelectricity. More than 90% of the electricity in Norway is hydroelectric. Means it's made from water. Water led through pipelines through the mountain, inside the mountain in pipelines, catching up a lot of speed. Have a speed of, well, power of 5 million Newton. It's the peloton wheel that spins around 300 times a minute, running the generator that produces electricity. Nice and clean, beautiful way to produce electricity. Then you see this water out to the right, and there are more water and lakes. They have a trout, mountain trout, a delicious fish that is in these lakes. And then there's some commercial fishing that they fish it and sell the fish down in the grocery store down in Geilo. And then of course the restaurants for the mountain trout on the menu. So it's a delicious fish. And I was asked a question there by the water. All the water in the mountain here you can drink. You can drink this lake water, no problem. The lake water is not as tasty as from the springs. You know, when you have moving more water, that is the best water you can drink. And actually the water in Geilo, where we just left from, is known to be some of the best water you have in Norway from the tap. More than 95, well, close to 99% of the water from tap has better quality than the water you buy in a shop. But if you want to spend your money, be happy to do so, but you get it for free from the tap. So when I'm in a grocery store and I see foreigners buying liters, like 10 liters of jugs with water, I think to myself, how stupid can you be? You know, you get it for free from the tap. And if you happen to pay money for it, here you go. But if you have a kind of an attitude, everyone, that if you pay for something, it's good quality. But actually, when it comes to water in Norway, that's not the truth at all. But then again, if you want to have a bit of a lime taste to the water, a bit of orange or a bit of a taste to it, you've got to pay for it.
The spring lime.
Or spritz your own lemon in there.
Yeah. So it's hard even for me to believe that they had 1,500 meters of ice on top of it. Not 150 meters, but 1,500 meters. Almost a mile thick ice on top of this. And in this area now there is not much animal life, but you have between 4,000 and 5,000 wild reindeer living in the mountains over to the left. We never see them by the road, they're too scared of the road. The road is actually a problem. There used to be about 30,000 wild reindeer in the 60s. Then the road was closed in the winter time, so then it was not a problem for the reindeer. They could cross the road and get the food on the other side of the road. But now the road is open all year round, and they say, you know, researchers say that stopped the reindeer from crossing the road, which means that the numbers of wild reindeer is reduced from 30,000 to somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000. That might be one of the reasons. Bad weather might be one of the reasons. A disease amongst the reindeer has been one of the reasons. So now they say that the numbers of wild reindeer is too low. They say it should be around 10,000 wild reindeer in this area, while now it's only 4,000 or 5,000. But being 4,000 or 5,000, it's the largest herd of reindeer in Europe and one of the larger groups of wild reindeer in the world. So, you know, there's still a lot of them, but they are a protected animal. So if you walk in these mountains and you're so lucky to see reindeer in far distance, you're not allowed to approach them. You are supposed to stop and avoid changing direction. I mean, if the reindeer is coming towards you, you can't help it, of course, but I'm very doubtful that will happen. They see the threat of the people much longer before you are able to see them. You know, they will run away from you. But you know, you might be lucky sometimes to see the wild reindeer. I've seen wild reindeer in Hardangerfjord 3 times, and I've been walking this mountain more than 100 times. So, and the closest I saw them from was about 500 meters. So you really need binoculars, and then you need to be with very experienced mountain people that are able to see the movement, because they basically know where every rock is. So when they see a rock moving, they think, well, that's not a rock, that's a reindeer from a distance. And a normal person not knowing the mountains will not see them at all, because you just have to be extremely lucky to be able to see them, or extremely experienced. There is a lodge coming up here now in front of us to the right called Fagerheim. Fagerheim was actually first built by the Germans during World War II. Norway was occupied by Germany from 1940 to 1945. And at that time the road was closed in the winter time, but the Germans wanted to be open in the winter time, bringing over military vehicles between Oslo and Bergen. So they built barracks here to the right for prisoners of war staying there while they were working on the road, trying to keep it open in the winter. That was quite difficult. They brought in 20 snow trucks from Germany to do the work, but still there was too much snow. It was very difficult to keep the road open. And they also built a 2 kilometer long tunnel of wood, with wood they imported from Finland. And the first winter, 1942, they had, the whole tunnel blew down because of the heavy winds and the snowstorms. Over to the right, you see Hardangerfjord, the glacier. You see the ice on top of the mountain? That is the glacier, 6th largest glacier in Norway, 75 square kilometer in size. But we'll see more of it as we get a bit further into the mountain. We see a lot more of it to the right. But you can walk on the glacier, of course, in summertime, but very much recommended to be on a guided tour, because you need special shoes with spikes on to be able to walk on the ice, because the ice is rock hard. But it's a quite amazing experience to walk on the ice, which can be done if you go to Finse, the train stop, the highest point on Hardangerfjord at the train stop Finse, and then it's a 4 or 5 kilometer walk into the Hardangerfjord, the glacier, and you can walk on it. But they have guided tours going from Finse to Hardangerfjord almost every day. I've skied on Hardangerfjord myself 3 times in the winter. It has 4, 5, 6 meters of snow on top of it, so you're okay skiing on it. That is not dangerous at all. But while in the winter time, no, in the summertime, when you don't have the snow on top, only the ice, then you have to be very careful. No, not there. No. Not here, not this one. No.
There's no ski lifts, right? So you just have to...
No ski lift there. So if you want to do walking in these mountains, you can start walking from the side of the road there to the left. And then you can walk for more than a week before you get into the next community. The next community on the other side of the mountain is Telemark. Telemark is quite a known community in Norway, and it's also has a little place called Morgedal in Telemark. And Morgedal, Telemark is known to be the birthplace of Nordic skiing. I don't know if you're familiar with skiing, you might have heard of Telemark skiing. You know, it's a special technique which was developed before the alpine skiing. But that was kind of the start of alpine skiing, was the start of Telemark skiing. And that comes from Morgedal in Telemark. Also over in Telemark you have the small little place called Rjukan. And the Rjukan is placed in a narrow, deep valley, which means they hardly ever see the sun, because, you know, the valley is so narrow and deep. So a few years ago they invested in some mirrors up in the mountain. So when the sun hits the mirror, it reflects down to Rjukan, so they get more sun than normal. So that's kind of a little tourist attraction, you know, see the sun reflect on the mirrors shining down on the Rjukan. But also in the Rjukan, right next to Rjukan, there is a factory, there was a factory, not anymore, producing heavy water in Vemork. And heavy water is what you needed to produce the atomic bomb. And you know, there was a race between the Americans and the Germans who would be the first to create the atomic bomb, and we know the story behind that. But the Germans were very close to it. They were collecting heavy water in big barrels. So then local spies in Rjukan realized that the Germans were up to something, because they looked like they were going to transport these barrels with heavy water to Germany, where they wanted to produce the atomic bomb. So the local spies reported this to the Allies, and the Allies found out that, well, the Germans are really up to something. Looks like they're really close to creating the atomic bomb, so we better stop them. So there was a plane coming in from England over Hardangerfjord. 18 Special Force soldiers jumped out in parachutes, spent a few weeks in Hardangerfjord preparing themselves for the attack of the factory down in Rjukan. And they were able to get into the factory, place the dynamite, and were able to get away before the Germans really knowing what was happening. And then, of course, the whole factory exploded, and they also ruined all the barrels with heavy water that was collected. So it stopped the Germans of having enough heavy water to produce the atomic bomb. I mean, also the story behind that. The Americans had the atomic bomb, but then a bit later. But the whole operation was written in a book by one of the members, one of the 18. And the book was very good and very popular. So in 1965, the book was made into a film. And actually one of the first color war films ever made. And Kirk Douglas, the actor, was the main role in the film, called Heroes from Telemark was the name of the film. So now, you know, you probably have a smart TV. You can search for the Heroes from Telemark when you get home and you can see the film, knowing that you've been in the area where it all happened. So that happened in Hardangerfjord over to the left. Ja, så måler og merker jeg der hvor stolpene skal stå.
Ja, helt sikkert.
Out of the dark, and then you don't see any light. It's totally dark, and you stop for a little break. Then you can hear some movements in the forest. That might be a fox running by, maybe an owl flying off. Makes movements in the trees, and then you keep on staring, and you imagine there is something there. Oh, there's something there up in front. That is what you tell your children, you know, because the children, when you walk with the children, they feel they see something in the forest, and that's what we call the troll. Well, tourism started to Norway more than 200 years ago. Back 200 years ago, Norway was a quite poor country, far up north with long winters, tough living. And then, more than 200 years ago, there were not many tourists around the world. And, you know, only the rich people could afford to travel. There were no airplanes at that time. You traveled with ships, you know, a much more expensive way of traveling. So only the rich could afford to travel. And that's how it started in Norway. Some rich people over in Britain probably made a lot of money from the colonies. And they were, you know, they were found out fly fishing in the rivers in England for Norway. And while they were fishing, they saw the mountains around in the area, especially up in Jotunheimen, a little bit further north from here. So they would ask the local farmer, how do I get to that top? I'd like to get to that mountain top. The farmer would reply, I don't know. I've never been there. Which is the fact. All over the world, a lot of tourist attractions are not seen by the local people, it's seen by tourists. The first man to climb Mount Everest, that was Sir Hillary from New Zealand in 1953, together with a Sherpa from Nepal that he paid to help him to the top. And same thing with the Norwegian mountains, not to be compared with the Mount Everest and the mountains in Nepal, but the mountain tops in Norway are climbed by rich English tourists first. And then they realized we had waterfalls all for the fish and for the nature, and also they're making sure that you have minimum 12 cubic meter of water a second going through the waterfall of Hardangerfjord. So before 1980, before this water reservoir was built, coming to see the waterfall of Hardangerfjord in August like we are now, it wouldn't be very impressive at all, because there's no snow melting, you know, lack of water. But since we have the water reservoir, we're able to supply enough water to make the waterfall look stunning and incredible, which you will see now in less than 20 minutes. So that's why Hardangerfjord is one of the most seen waterfalls in Norway, because they have enough water to supply into it. Of course, there are other waterfalls that are quite amazing, but most of the waterfalls are quite small now because of lack of water. Of course, if it rains heavily over a few days, then the waterfalls will increase in size right away. While Hardangerfjord is not, doesn't need the rain. We have the water reservoir. So when tourism started, they also wanted to see, as I said, the waterfalls. So then there were ships coming in from Bergen into Eidfjord, where we will finish the tour today. And in Eidfjord there's 85 cruise ships coming in this summer, bringing in more than 200,000 people. I believe there is a cruise ship today, so there's quite a few people. But in the old days, they met with a local farmer down in Eidfjord with a horse and carriage that took you up towards the waterfall, because the road was not open yet all the way up, so you had to climb and walk and climb to see the waterfall, and then back to Eidfjord for the ship going back to Bergen. The trip took about 12 hours. Now it takes less than 2 hours. We take, you know, I'm not a farmer, but I take them on a bus, and then we drive up to see the waterfall. So it's quite charming knowing that what we are doing today, seeing the mountains and the waterfall, it's how it started with tourism to Norway more than 200 years ago. It's just that we have developed it a little bit better, you know, the more better roads going to the top and to the waterfall, but still doing the same thing. You see this big wall now in front of us, and to the right, that is Sysendammen, the water reservoir, which supplies water into the waterfall and also down to the hydroelectric plant down in Eidfjord. Eidfjord have 5 hydroelectric plants producing electricity, and the largest hydroelectric plant in Eidfjord is actually the second largest in Norway. So it's a good money maker. The whole investment was done by 1980. They opened that hydroelectric plant, and already by 1987, 7 years, it was all paid for. The whole investment was paid for. So now you just have to keep the peloton wheel running and producing electricity, and the money rolls in to the community. And I like to call the peloton wheel now a money wheel, because that's probably what it is. It spins around, and the cost of producing electricity is very close to zero. But then, of course, you charge for the electricity, and that's where you make the money. So again, all these houses you see here over to the right, quite new ones. These are all holiday homes. These are not private houses for the inhabitants. These are actually holiday homes. The community of Eidfjord, where we are now, is quite large, but with a small population of only 950. And 90% of the community is above 1,000 meters, so it's a very mountainous community, which makes it very popular for holidaymakers. So we will see now a lot of holiday homes coming up in front of us, and down to the left, and in front of us up to the right. All these are then holiday homes, and these are mainly owned by people around the Bergen area, because then they don't need to cross the mountain in the winter time to get to the cabin, because this is the other side of the mountain. The weather on the mountain can make it a bit difficult to get over, so that's why they have their cabins on this side of the mountain. And the activities they do: summertime hiking, wintertime of course skiing, being the national sport of Norway. When I do my travel around in the world, and people here are from Norway and I get to know them, they ask me, do you ski? And then I just return this question and say, do you bike? You know, of course, a Norwegian ski. And if you don't taught skiing by your parents, that is something you will be taught in kindergarten. You know, because in Geilo, where I live, there's snow on the ground for 7-8 months of the year. Then of course the children need some sort of activity, and then you learn how to ski. And then if you in school have a ski day in school, you know, they have some sports activities in school. So they have like in Norway we have ski days. And then you tell your teacher, I'm not coming for the ski day tomorrow because I don't have any skis. And the teacher will tell you that you are coming because we will supply you with skis. There's no excuse for not skiing. That might be one of the reasons why Norway is doing so well in the Winter Olympics, being the most winning nation through the history of the Winter Olympics. We have long winters, and skiing, of course, is our national sport. All these to the left there are holiday flats, and then of course with all the holiday homes here, you have a ski slope here to the right, which is owned by all the cabins, all the holiday homes in the area.
You guys are all very fit in Norway. We're embarrassed. We're Americans. We're lazy.
We have to move. I wouldn't say I'm very fit, but
Oh, you guys are very active.
Well, when we started with tourism, Norway was one of the poorest countries in Europe. You know, small fishing and farming was basically the income you had. Sold a bit of fish abroad. You know, we have the stockfish, dried cod, which sell to Portugal. Portugal's national food is bacalhau, which is made of the stockfish from Norway. And we also export to Brazil. You know, Brazil is very closely connected to Portugal, and also bacalhau is quite popular in Brazil, also made from the stockfish in Norway. But then everything changed in the 60s, 1960, late 1960, Norway discovered oil in the North Sea. We did not have a clue about how to get the oil up from under the seabed, under the sea, so we had to ask American companies to come and help us. And then of course I said, yes, we'll help you, knowing there's a lot of money to be made. Well, we also said to the American companies, you have to employ Norwegians to work with you, because we didn't have any knowledge of it, so we had to learn. So that was one of the demands, and also you have to pay tax. The oil belongs to the people of Norway, you have to pay tax. They did not like that very much, but understood they had to pay tax, of course, of the income. And then they asked how much, and the Norwegians were crazy, and they said 80%. Well, that's totally unheard of, they said. But anyway, they started digging up the oil. They made a lot of money. The Norwegian government made a lot of money. And the money was rolling in the 70s and 80s and 90s, still rolling in. Norway's making a lot of money from oil and gas. But in the early 1990s, they realized if we keep on taking all the money we make from oil and gas into the GDP of Norway, it's too much. We have to do something. The inflation goes up. So then we started a financial fund. We call it the oil fund. So all the profit from oil and gas goes into a separate fund, not into the GDP of Norway. And that separate fund, we invest in shares in companies all over the world. So Norway owns shares in more than 9,000 international companies, some of the biggest ones in the world. You know, Tesla, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, and all these, you know, just to mention a few of them. But 9,000 companies we have shares in. Actually, Norway owns 1.5% of the total shares of the world with their investment from the oil and gas. And then we also invested money in property in London. Norway owns 20% of the company that owns all the shopping streets in London, you know, in the central London. Owns shopping areas in Paris, around Champs-Élysées, expensive areas where the value of the property will never go down. They also own property in Tokyo, an area where real estate is very expensive. So we invested money like that with the money from the oil and gas. Instead of spending it, we have invested it. Now the value of the fund is 20,000 billion Norwegian kroner. 20,000 billion Norwegian kroner is 10 times more than the GDP of Norway. So in Norway we are far from deficit. We could basically close down Norway for 10 years and spend from our savings. We're not doing that. We wouldn't be very smart. But that just shows you that how much money we've been able to save up. And if you Google oil money in Norway, you can read about it. It's a wonderful story. And financial people all over the world very often say, look to Norway. They have the biggest state financial fund in the world. No other country has saved up so much money according to the size of the country as Norway has done. That might be one of the reasons for the successfulness of the business of the oil and gas industry in Norway. So from being one of the poorest countries in Europe, we are now one of the richest countries in the world. And also with great experience within the oil, because we started right away learning how to take it up in the late 1960s. Actually, we struck oil Christmas Eve, 1969. You know, so it was a wonderful Christmas present for the Norwegian people. Anyway, oil is not the only thing. We also make money from seafood. We are the biggest producers of salmon in the world. And we are almost the biggest exporter of seafood, only beaten by China. So Norway is number 2 when it comes to export of seafood. We export 3,100 tons of seafood a year. And that is enough seafood to feed 46 million people per day, all year round. And being a population of only 5.5 million people, we can't eat all that seafood. So that's why we export it and make a lot of money on it. I'm quite sure wherever you live, if you walk into a grocery store with a fish department, I'm quite sure you will find salmon from Norway. It's exported all over the world. And then we are big in shipping. Norway has always been big in shipping, and that is also a very important income to Norway. Shipping, international shipping. And we also produce aluminum in on the coast of Norway. We have aluminum factories producing aluminum for the car industry in Europe. That is also a very important income. So it's not only the oil, but the oil and gas being the most important thing. And the sadness about oil and gas making a lot of money. It shouldn't be sad.